Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Practitioners Podcast, where we dive into real world stories and strategies of manufacturing digital transformation. Join us as we hear from thought leaders and innovators who are driving change and shaping the future of Industry 4.0. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just curious about the future of manufacturing, this podcast is for you. Today, on episode 3 of the Practitioners Podcast, we're thrilled to welcome Mike Labhart, Director of Smart Factory and Innovation North America for Schneider Electric. As a visionary leader in the field of digital transformation, Mike has been at the forefront of driving innovative solutions and strategies that are reshaping the manufacturing landscape at Schneider Electric. Get ready to be inspired by his journey, insights, and the groundbreaking work that he's done to lead change at Schneider Electric. So, Mike, welcome to the podcast. Can you take a few minutes, introduce yourself to the audience, let us know what your role is, a little bit about your background, how you got started, and how you ended up in the position you are in today.
Absolutely. Hi, Dante. Hi, Sri. Pleasure to be a part of this. As you mentioned, Dante, the name is Mike Labhart. I've been in manufacturing now for nearly 30 years, and I started as an electrical engineer. I've been based here in the Lexington, Kentucky facility of Schneider Electric. I worked in the plant for about 15 years in various roles of controls engineer, um, maintenance manager, different maintenance supervisor roles, maintenance engineer, manufacturing engineering manager in the facility. My background has been a lot of machinery, automation, troubleshooting, the things that make them electrical, mechanical things that make our factories move. That's where I've spent my time. I joined what we call the Smart Factory program in its infancy about 7 years ago. And I've worked through that organization now trying to help plants digitally transform here in our North American supply chain. And my current role is Director of Innovation and Smart Factory for the supply chain performance team. I get the cool job of being able to travel around to our facilities and try to help them adopt what we call our digital tool bag. And then I also work with a global innovation team to try and identify new technologies and trial those technologies, innovative technologies in our facilities that may help improve our operation.
Awesome. Thanks for that.
Mike,
So, how many plants?
sorry,
Oops, go ahead, Sri.
Mike, quickly, for those trying to find you on LinkedIn, you also go by Kenneth Labhart. So,
It
very
is
quick.
it is
Yeah.
true. It is true. It is a long story. I did want to. Kenneth Labhart is the first name. I go by my middle name, Mike. I'll answer to either one. It's just sometimes I respond faster to Mike. So yes, but you will find me on LinkedIn and Kenneth. Correct.
Awesome. So, Mike, can you talk about the North American footprint when you say you lead for the North American factories? How many factories are your responsibilities right now?
So right now we have about 32, I believe, facilities throughout Canada, North America, or I mean Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. And I interface on a regular basis. We've got some form of digital transformation that's ongoing at some level in about 26 of those facilities right now. Okay, that varies from what we call the basics, which is the beginning of performance measurement, on up through more of the advanced analytics side of digital transformation, machine learning, that type of thing for trying to identify anomalies and problems in certain processes.
Okay, so that's a North American footprint, but you did say you work with the global team. What's the size of the global manufacturing footprint?
Oh, I think there's nearly 200 facilities, okay, that are globally in terms of our global footprint in the international region, China, Europe, and also North America. We have at last count, I think that digital transformation journey was taking place in, I think, over 100 of those facilities throughout the globe.
Okay, so roughly 50% of the operations are transforming in some form of another, right?
That's right.
Okay. So how did you guys, that's a large footprint, right? And that's a lot of things to scale. And you had mentioned that you started this around 7 years ago. So how did that journey begin, and how did you guys get to the point where you're able to scale across
Yeah.
100 different facilities in what some would consider a short period of time.
Yeah. And it's not it wasn't by any means it's hard to describe some of the difficulties in just talking and having the conversation about the journey. Um we started in around the 2017 timeframe with what we called the Smart Factory program, and that was really that first few formative months and the fall and that year was really a sort of a sprint. Okay, so it was a sprint trying to understand what the fourth industrial revolution provided us in terms of technology, investing in that technology and trialing technology. We spent about 6 months in 10 target facilities across the globe, um, investing and playing with the technologies to understand what the technologies could deliver, how the technologies could be integrated into our landscape. And we attempted to develop or adopt technologies that we felt had a direct impact on some form of our operations. Okay. Now, we may have made some mistakes early on in that journey, and the fact that um, maybe our focus or our scope was a little bit too wide, or what I call too sexy. Okay. At that time, we were chasing, we probably chased some things that we shouldn't have chased without having basics in place first. Okay. It was a learning curve, a learning experience. And really that formative months of that sprint was where we learned what was beyond our capability of scaling and what we had the capability of scaling in terms of technology at that time. That's how we got our beginning. Okay.
Okay. So it seems like you did a lot of playing around after that 6-month period. And we've had this conversation before. And I think after that 6 months of playing, you kind of took a step back, right? And established that digital core. So what happened to all those other things that you were chasing? And then how did you guys know what to refocus on?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question, and there was a bit of learning pain there with, I've said before in these types of discussions, we wasted some money. Okay, now not really waste. We invested in some things that maybe not necessarily were not meant to be. We realized when we looked back in that previous sprint that we needed to refocus a lot of our thinking more towards problem solving and not just technology. Okay. Really, we took a step back and focused our portfolio of digital tools on real world problems that the plant has. I'll never forget that. I know that in Lexington, in our Lexington, Kentucky facility, I still remember I've got the slide somewhere. I found it from from that time period where I was trying to describe to some of the upper level managers what our problems were. And it is a visualization of maintenance, and it's a visualization of manufacturing engineering, and a visualization of quality people. And they're asking questions like, I don't have visibility of what's happening here in the plant. I don't trust the performance calculation of one department versus the other department. I can't answer the question, what happened in my machine last night between two different variables in that machine, or two different things like mechanical cylinders or valves. I can't troubleshoot effectively. Um, when you look back at those questions, okay, from surveying the plant about what the real problems were, that's where we really started to gain traction by focusing our development of that digital tool bag on solving those problems. Okay. Solutions for performance measurement. What solution do we put in place to measure the very basic performance of the factory digitally? Okay. What solution to put in place, and what architecture to deliver the backbone for IoT? How are we going to gather signals from our factories? And more importantly than just the solutions that we pick for those types of things to solve specific problems, what are the architectures of those solutions? Because what was done there had to be scaled. Okay. And it had to be scaled to facilities that may not necessarily be at the same level in terms of architecture. Okay. And there's a bit of a trade-off there from time to time in terms of, maybe one facility is more advanced than the other in terms of architecture, and maybe there's a better way of doing something in one facility than the other, but yet you have to scale, and you have to find a way to bring the majority of your operations along on that journey. So it was very important for us to document, okay, those methods of architecture, the cybersecurity standards, which we really didn't understand completely at the time, okay, and we were learning. Um, I've rambled a little bit here, but the bottom line is when you ask the question about how did we get started, what we learned, we learned to focus on solving problems, okay? And that's really been at now the heart of what I call the Smart Factory program for the last 5, 6 years has been evaluating what those things can bring in terms of benefit, in terms of solving an actual problem as they become part of that, what we call the digital tool bag, which we try to develop those standards for and scale throughout the factory.
Mike, if I can, frame what you said. Um, uh, so I heard another customer use this phrase: "Think big, start small, fail fast, and then scale." And it's very reminiscent of that mindset. And I think in the think big, it would be remiss for not mentioning the fact that Schneider is the best run supply chain in the at least in the industrial context today, right? So you have always been thinking big, but still in that continuous improvement journey, you still need the room to go experiment, try some things. It's not necessarily a wasted investment, but that's part of the process.
You're absolutely right, and I use the term wasted money. You're myself. I come from the factory floor, so it is also a shift, a paradigm shift for a person who is always, scrutinized. Anybody in manufacturing understands you don't waste money. It's a failure
Right.
it's a failure to spend money on something just to learn. Okay. That's generally the mantra the paradigm in a manufacturing environment. Um, it is a paradigm shift to begin thinking about disruptive innovation and learning about new technologies, and that has to be done, okay, to learn, all right, and to develop, and it helps to have the top down push for that type of thing from senior leadership, and that's exactly what we have here that we're fortunate enough to have that here in Schneider Electric. It is understood that there will be failures. It is understood that that's part of the innovation cycle. Okay. And it's made it easier. Okay, Sri, but it is a good point that you bring. It is a dynamic shift for some to come from manufacturing and realize that they're going to have to fail sometimes because failure is not something that's looked upon positively and in the hustle and bustle and the demands of a manufacturing environment. It's definitely different.
So that makes me curious about you as so you're, let's say, a change agent, right? So that profile is not, you don't find too many. I mean, it takes a certain mindset, it takes a certain background. I'm curious about, in your journey, starting in manufacturing, it's all efficiency, efficiency, and then that shift. Was there any particular lesson or something along the way that you had a couple of aha moments? Just wondering.
Well, from a bigger picture here, if you talk, if you ask me about personally, career wise, how I made that transformation, you bring up a good point, Sri. I took this role or stepped into this role to do exactly that. I wanted to move more. Very often we find, those individuals who are very good at what they do in the manufacturing world, they're very one and zero oriented, black and white oriented, okay, binary oriented in terms of I know that this needs to be done. I need to do this. The day is fairly mapped out in terms of the objective. Keep it running. Okay. I personally took the choice to move into this type of role because it is not binary. okay, defined. It is a gray world, okay? It is a gray world where you have to develop the skills of setting strategy, okay, and putting together the pieces that are not necessarily defined in front of you, okay? And that was my aha moment, all right? My personal aha moment was realizing that I wanted to branch out of that binary and I wanted to develop that skill set for trying to develop strategy and putting that kind of strategic thinking together. Okay. Now, have failed and I've failed at that in places and been successful. But if you talk personally about a change management agent versus what we traditionally call an engineer, that was a big step for me. Okay. Was realizing that I wanted to build that side of my brain that had the capability of building strategy instead of that binary black and white world where I knew the objective.
We do need a way to, like find the Mike Labharts and cultivate them and nurture them. I don't think it's explicitly, there's no handbook out there to, uh, you know, that tells you how to do this. Right.
No.
I find it quite interesting because the moment you say you put change agent on your business card, then, it's like nobody wants to deal with you. It's a very subtle thing that you bring to the transformation.
Yeah, it is. It is, and it was difficult. Um, still difficult to this day, Sri. Okay, to develop and to build that. Oftentimes, as I mentioned, on the manufacturing floor, there was a clear objective. You know what you needed to do. You step out of that world, and you have to step into. Not only do you possibly not really know the clear directive, but you have some kind of general idea. You have to convince others that your idea is where it should be adopted and should be achieved. And it is difficult. And I'm not going to lie. And personally, it's been challenging to develop that side of the skill set, but it's
Yeah.
rewarding and it makes life very interesting.
Yes.
I want to dig into that just a little bit more, Mike. So it seems like there's a differentiation because, again, we've talked about this before. The goal of manufacturing is to make as much stuff as quickly as possible, get it out the door. So, how do we balance managing the status quo, getting product out, and then starting to implement innovation when we know it could be disruptive to the operations? So, how do you get that buy in? How do you balance that? I think maybe just thinking outside the box here, your ability as, somebody that's been on the engineering side to relate to that, but what does that take and how does that organization set up to be able to develop innovation while keeping a high volume manufacturing plant running full time?
Yeah, it is a feedback loop process, Dante. So it is. People have asked me this before. What's the biggest lesson you learned in this thing? Okay, one of the biggest lessons is you can't walk away from it. All right. So you as an example, you can't take a tablet, deliver it to somebody who didn't grow up using, okay, a smartphone or a mobile device and say, here you are, 4 hours worth of training. You feel good, walk away and never talk to that person. It just doesn't work like that. Okay. Technology is often not perfect. It has to be developed. You can't deploy a technology, 4 hours of training, walk away from that person. You have to be very cognizant of the fact that um, there is a period of time in the adoption phase when a person will accept. Um, there's a period of time where a person will accept inadequacies of something before they give up. Okay. If during that period of time you don't intervene with the person and fix the technology problem or take the fear away, you've lost it forever. Okay. Or it's very hard to recover at that point. Okay. So, how did we do it? We did it well in some places. We made some mistakes. Okay. We learned early on that it is a constant feedback loop of working with individuals for adoption. And also we've made the mistake of ignoring the technology or assuming that the technology was adequate. Okay. And anybody that's in a large organization and understands what they fight in terms of cybersecurity, things change on a regular basis, sometimes on a weekly basis in terms of rules, procedures, processes that need to be followed. in order to preserve cybersecurity in an organization, those changes can take an application that was working fine and can cause some type of restriction or a problem. The end person that uses that technology, when they experience that, there is a very short period of time that has to be dealt with, or they just simply shrug it off and they're not going to adopt it and use it. So, um, we try to plant and we try to have digital champions, okay, in our factories and what we call our priority factories. And their purpose, okay, is both the change management side of helping adopt the technology and dealing with those problems, and also liaisoning between the smart factory team in the region, okay, for the standard methods, the architectures, the how to deploy and how to use. But we try to develop somebody in the site, in the process, to actually perform that that uh, that change management help. And I think it's got to be successful. You got to have that to be successful. There has to be a constant feedback loop with the people who are adopting the technology.
Yeah, that's a great point there. And going back to that person, so just for people that are going through a transformation, is that a full-time job or is that just somebody that's excited about what's going on and they're doing this in addition to their day-to-day tasks?
Yeah, it depends on the size of the facility, okay, and the complexity of the facility. In some facilities, yeah, it's a full-time job. In some, it's a partial job, okay? It may have been a manufacturing engineer or a what we call an industrial performance leader, continuous improvement type individual who has great digital acumen, all right? And that person would have part of their job committed to that role, okay? Um, it depends on the complexity, the size of the plant. Never, or at least it's not the intention, to make simply an engineer or someone who's heavily technically oriented, okay, and not change management oriented into that role, okay? It's a combination. We seek that combination of somebody who has the ability to lead and has a strong digital acumen to be able to interface back and forth with the central function team to keep that adoption alive, to keep that interest alive while we improve the tool, while modify the tool, while we make sure that it delivers for the end user.
Yeah, the feedback loop is important. I'll just ask one more question on the change management and sure I'll let you go.
No,
Sorry
no,
about that.
yeah, go
But
ahead.
yeah, I see two different paths to the change management. Now, I've been to the Lexington facility many, many times, and there's a wall there of, you know, employees with very, very long tenure. I think one employee is celebrating 60 years there. So there's I look at change management in two ways. One, how do we change the culture that have just, they've been very comfortable in the way things have operated every single day. And then also bringing new people in. So which part of the change management is easier? Is it easier to, bring somebody in, cold off the street and have them upskilled and just adopt what's in there versus changing the internal culture that has been there forever?
Yeah. Yeah, I've been asked this before, and I've been asked the question before by other people is how do you bring your workforce up to speed? And I sometimes give the answer that's not I don't commonly hear this from other people, but I'm gonna say it. It's not as big of an issue for the younger workforce. And let me explain. My kids who are now grown and gone, they don't know what it's like to not grow up with a smartphone. They've always had an app. Okay. They always add some type of platform, some type of device in their hand that delivers data or information to them. Okay. Well, I try to explain to them that, early in my career, or even in college, when I left work or when I left a particular place and wanted to talk to somebody, I didn't talk to those people until I got to the next phone. Okay. I didn't know what the weather was going to do tomorrow instantly by looking at something on my phone. I didn't transfer funds and bank accounts or transfer money to my debit account instantly in the palm of my hand. I didn't even know what that was. Okay. The people that are coming, generally the younger workforce is coming into our facilities now, they expect digital transformation. It's not just that they know what it's like to use fourth industrial revolution technology. They expect it. Okay. Whereas when you say you saw the plaque of people, and even I'm in that same age group as well, the age group of my generation, we didn't grow up with it. Okay, it's more of a challenge there. Okay, um, the challenge is taking the fear away. You have to take the fear away. Okay, um, really, there's two parts to that. The adoption will be much easier with this with that age group if it solves a problem. Okay. If they can use it and it helps. All right. And number two is that feedback loop's in place to take the fear away. Okay. If the feedback loop is not there and we leave that person, um, and we leave that person dangle on the vine and we don't pay attention to the problems that they're having with the technology, the fear grows and eventually we lose the adoption of that and we go back to our old way. But the short answer to your question, Dante, is it easier, much easier with the younger workforce or those that are coming in. It's expected. They know it. They can't believe that they would walk into a facility and not have data at their fingertips.
This whole topic, could be framed as the critical last mile of adoption. Because if you don't get this right, so all the effort put in to new technology enablement could unravel. Um, One thing I'm curious about, Mike, is that there aren't enough change agents internally. Partners have to come in. And if I think of the plant, the people who need to change behavior, there's always this us versus them mindset, right? So if it's an external consulting partner, if they come in, do you have any thoughts, any advice for, let's say, an external consulting partner coming in and trying to do that? Any do's and don'ts?
Well, I mean, I don't have, I guess I do have, I guess I could say I have some experience as acting as that third party or outside trying to come in. And I go back to that digital champion. It's very important to have someone that's embedded in part of the operation in that facility that knows the people in the facility. They know the makeup, the demographic of the people in the facility. They understand the problems and how those digital tools can solve the problems, and they have that bit of change management skill to help drive the adoption of a digital tool. That's very important. It is. I can understand that, it would be very if I came into a facility and not and I didn't have that person who was aligned with my goals, it would be very difficult not knowing the people or the demographic on how to it's not impossible at that point, okay, but it is, the time scale, I think, becomes a lot longer, all right? I think having that commitment from the plant to have that person who has that capability of digital acumen and change management, uh, be part of the plant, the staff, I think that's critical for the employee. I don't see, um I have no experience with success without that, is what I'm saying, Sri, if that makes sense.
100%.
Yeah.
Now let's shift from kind of like the change management and how we're impacting the plant floor to let's kind of move up within the organization. So you had mentioned a lot that, hey, we had disparate KPIs throughout the plants, different value streams, different workstations, all reporting numbers and metrics at different ways. So how did this transformation with, let's say, establishing that digital core with that KPI tracking, change the way that the plant manager was able to do his job in the facility?
So back to the basics, okay? I mentioned, um, and I ought to take a step back to here just 1 minute, Donnie, and talk about the fact that early on, okay, when we look to make the kind of, hey, where are we gonna focus at? Where are we gonna go? What are we gonna do? Okay? There was there needs to be a certain level of an adoption of a standardized production facility system in those facilities, okay? And the reason being for that is, you know, what do you do with the data when you have it, okay? If you go into a facility, okay, if you go into a facility that has no production system in place. It has no definition of how to drive continuous improvement. It has no definition of how to handle maintenance of assets. It has no definition on how to plan. It has no definition on how to schedule production, or how to train individuals. Okay. Without that production system, we really have no, um, we have no ability to know what to do with the data when we digitize. Okay. In all of those situations where there's a strong production system in place, okay, um, you have some type of process that's being done on paper now. Okay. Nobody's been in manufacturing for years and years, um, and been successful without knowing what the performance of their operations are. They may know, they may be tracking. It may be very difficult to analyze or to develop a Pareto of reasons for why your performance is very bad because it's not digitized, but it's known to some degree. Okay. Having a production system in place, we call ours the Schneider production system. Okay, there are various names of different production systems that exist with heavily, driven heavily by lean philosophies. Having that in place in some kind of mature level gives you the conduit for what you're going to do when you do digitize the process. When the plant manager at that facility now, who has been okay, taking different um, metrics from Excel spreadsheets, from paper, from different departments in the plant, when you now give them the tool that says, here's the digital collection of your downtime reason codes, and here's the digital collection of your performance. It's those types of things are very easily used for improvement. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to, what you said before about closing the loop, right? Having that definition. And I get in this conversation a lot with customers where they're talking like we need to track OEE. And where a lot of that falls apart is they don't have a system and process behind it to drive it. And to me, OEE is a lagging measure of different issues, right? It's a symptom of problems, but they don't have the ability or the visualization to go in and see what those problems actually are. So I think that's what I saw pretty maturely at Schneider is really that established process that may have been on a whiteboard before, but you don't have the ability to consolidate and get that historical documentation of what those issues actually are. And once you're able to Pareto that out, you're starting to identify those drivers within those facilities, whether it's because if you talk to any of the functions, well, I need predictive maintenance, I need this, I need that. Well, it could have been a starvation event from a supply chain, right? That was accounting for most of the downtime and maintenance could be 4% or 2%, right? So it seems like you guys are Paretoing a lot of that stuff out, closing that loop and bringing those cross-functional collaborations together to collectively solve this with technology.
That's the strategy. Digitize the basics of continuous improvement. Digitize the ability to collect and count and account efficiency in a standardized way across all the departments. Digitize the method of collecting what we call the red time, the
Mhm.
waste. Okay, some of that in a manual fashion, some of that in an automated fashion, and then digitize the continuous improvement process that handles and manages the actions that are put in place and assignments to the support resources to kill those things that are increasing your waste or your red. The digitization of that process is much more successful when you have a production system in place that formalizes how you're going to use that digitize
And
that data that you get from digital
and I
transformation.
saw that I saw like on the Schneider organizations that I've seen and I've been million different customer sites is really that culture of accountability and that strong process in the background. We always talk digital transformation as people, process, and technology. And I'm a strong proponent of seeing what Schneider's doing internal, um, as you can't have any two of the three or one of the three. All three of those things have to be kind of figured out, or you're not going to be successful.
True. That's absolutely right. And I'm not saying we're perfect. Okay.
No,
I'm not saying, look, I'm not telling you that our digital tools are perfect. I go back to things change on a weekly basis. Okay. Um, you know, what may have worked last week, okay, now may face some type of cybersecurity rule that's driven by the fact that there was a malware attack or there was some type of attack that found a vulnerability. And now we find that something either works slower, possibly, maybe something doesn't work at all, crashes at some time throughout the day. And it's vital that there's a feedback loop there and somebody is trying to attack those things and fix them, or the end user loses interest, and rightfully so. The manufacturing floor is a busy environment. There is little time or little attention to be paid to things that don't work. And we fight that. We struggle with that. We're not perfect. We have that issue on a regular basis. I've was involved in a discussion that this morning where we have a performance issue on one of the tools, and we have to deep dive to the bottom of it and figure out why it is hampering the user experience. And we got to be quick with that and react to that.
So, Mike,
That being said, guys, I think it's very important. Do not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Okay. And what I mean by that is if I walk through some of our older facilities, I could count 5 or 6 or even 7 type of digital performance systems that were attempted and never standardized. The time was spent, the investment was lost and wasted, couldn't be copy and pasted to another facility. Um, there was no continuous improvement on that technology and how it integrates into the people, into the factory floor. There was no formalized process for that, and it died. There are very few things that work perfectly, that are perfect and always going to work perfect for your specific set of needs in an organization. I am a big proponent of the continuous improvement of that digital tool to drive adoption in your facility and not jumping from one thing to the next or completely removing or getting rid of that technology and going to something else. Okay. It's very important in my mind to make sure that the technology has the basics, as in this case of calculating performance. It has the basics of being able to digitally collect and calculate performance, visualizing it, collecting the waste time, and managing the actions that are going to be used to kill that waste time. If it has those basics, okay, then you continually improve the tool, okay, through a series of hot fixes and patches and upwares and releases. You continue to develop the tool and build it close to perfection. There's very few perfections out of the box with things, folks.
so Mike, I want to build on what you said and perhaps use it as an opportunity to reframe smart manufacturing. Because we could say that if you looked at the Toyota production system of 20, 30 years ago, that was smart manufacturing. It may have been
Mhm.
on paper, but it was certainly smart, elements of
Sure.
smart. And in fact, what we're doing with the technology is when you have that philosophical core of smart, now you can turbocharge with technology
Sure.
and compress and accelerate and break new boundaries. So it's because I think there is a tendency to think that smart is all these new bells and whistles and
Oh,
industry 4.0, and before industry 4.0 it was dumb. Hardly.
yeah. No, no, no. You look. I've always explained it. There's a side and even a part of the artificial intelligence and machine learning applications that we're trying to implement into manufacturing now. We were trying to do the same thing 20 years ago. We were doing the same thing 20 years ago. I take examples of some of our critical processes in the plant. We were tracking critical to quality parameters. We were tracking those then. Okay. We were visualizing those then. Maybe we were visualizing that by printing a sheet of paper or posting it. Maybe our historical collection of that was isolated in an Excel spreadsheet or an Access database on that computer in that supervisor's office. But we were still doing it. We were trying it. What the fourth industrial revolution brought us was it brought us a set of tools that made it easier. Okay. That's what it brought us. Okay. It didn't bring us, it enabled us to do the things that we've been trying to do all along. Okay. Now, you know, I can't make that argument for generative AI, okay, or some of the higher level artificial intelligence things that we're beginning to play with now. I've always wanted to be able to search a random data set of historical records and be able to establish to be able to find something or find something that had meaning to solve a problem. Didn't have that capability then 20 years ago. I didn't have the hardware that could support that type of numerical methods. We had the numerical methods. We were working on the numerical methods, but we didn't have the hardware to support it. We do today. Okay. So you're absolutely right. So it's a good point. It's, it's not the fact that we weren't smart 20 years ago. We knew what we had to do. We were trying to do it. We were doing it with different methods. We're digitized. Okay, maybe that's a better term than smart.
No, I think I find that we have a tendency to put the technology cart before the mindset and process horse.
No, you're absolutely right. That's why I made the point about it's very important to have some type of formalized production system in place, okay, to make that digital transformation better. Okay. Um, Knowing what you're going to be able to do with the data when you have it digitized is a big piece of the puzzle.
So you had mentioned, some of everybody's favorite buzzwords now, generative AI and things like that. What's kind of your vision for the future? And then what do you see as a barrier to leveraging some of those technologies on the manufacturing floor?
Um, I would, in terms of the future, of course, it's easy for me here to sit here and say, AI is the future. Everything's, AI. But there are when I look at specific things with equipment on the manufacturing floor, okay, I'm kind of beyond anomaly detection with machine learning now here in the company. Okay, we're developing a standard architecture for that, a standard platform where we use contextualized data to develop machine learning models that detect anomalies in equipment and try to predict the failure or at least provide us indication of a predictive nature of, hey, something is getting worse. It's not what it was like 6 months ago. A combination of things are not what they were like 6 months ago. Go ahead and look at that. Okay. I think where we're going to be, very rapidly here in the near future, if not now, is we're going to have I think we're out much more analysis of video and audio signals from the factory floor. When a human being walks on the factory floor, how do we determine that something's wrong? We generally look and we can tell by looking at a process or looking at a piece of equipment that, hey, I've got a cable that's worn here. It's starting to fray. It's not causing any performance issues with the machine, but that's going to break here in the next week, and that's going to cause me downtime. Okay. I've got a belt that's beginning to shred. It's starting to show wear. It's showing no indication from an IoT perspective in terms of elevated motor current or vibration or anything else, but it's going to break in a week. Okay. I think we're going to determine those things with video analysis. So I think really AI image analysis is really going to be something that is going to be very highly prevalent. A lot, and a lot of manufacturers that may be listening to this, they'll chuckle and say, "Well, we're already there," and that's true. Okay, we're not where I would like to see us be at that level here in Schneider Electric. Okay, the image analysis of our asset health and our operations using artificial intelligence to determine problems and states. We are I feel pretty good in with Schneider Electric here in terms of the use of deep learning and AI vision for determining product quality. We have probably, I think the last time I looked, we have over 100 installations in North America now that are using some form of deep learning at the edge for validating product quality. Okay. But I think we're just starting to step into that for asset health. Okay. So I think AI, okay, is going to really bring the benefit there. Okay. Generative AI is Gen AI is Dante something that also is bringing benefit now, okay? But we need to take the step here in our company to exposing it to the records of our OT layer. We have Gen AI involved now in exposure to what I call our ERP records, our records at a higher level. Your planning, okay, your vendor for your sales forecasting, your vendor management in terms of what's going to be needed from what vendor by when. Okay. Gen AI is starting to help us answer some of those questions. But what we haven't done yet is I haven't turned it loose on our OT layer data yet. Okay. And that's going to be a big win. Imagine a maintenance mechanic just walking up to a machine, see it operating a certain way, and asking, say, a chatbot a question. Hey, a language learn, a natural language learn processing an AI application, answering the question. Hey, I'm seeing what component, what can cause this component to act this certain way. Bang, all the electrical prints searched, all of the electrical diagrams searched, all of the user's manuals on the piece of equipment, and that single answer deliver. Hey, you need to check this. That's probably going bad. Something like that. That's going to be something that is going to provide big benefit for us. We need to unlock our OT layer data into that Gen AI model. I think that's going to be big for us.
And
I'd say those are the two areas in the short term.
yeah, and I think, Mike, you bring up an important point in the sense that with AI, there's all these impressive sounding words, but the proven use case today is in the analytical chores, right?
Sure, sure,
But it is
sure.
freeing up your time to actually go work on more valuable problems, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Like I said, I'm kind of talking. I'm not. Don't want to say we've mastered it. We haven't. Okay, but we've got a pretty good foothold on machine learning to detect anomalies in the processes. Okay, and a lesson that we learned early on there with Sri was uh, the contextualization of the data. Okay, so we ran early on with IoT in the company, and we connected a lot of things, and we collected a lot of machine signals, and we got a lot of benefit out of it. Okay, every plant got their descriptive analysis of what happened when particular machine signals and describing asset health with machine signals. But what we didn't do a good job of was standardizing the architecture of that data early on. And we found that a lot of different plants called similar signals for similar pieces of equipment different things. Okay. And we had no real organization on that. That's when the scaling of machine learning becomes very difficult because you may have a plant that finds success with using their IoT signals that describes a process or an asset. They've used those signals to detect an anomaly or to optimize a process, but I want to use the same model that they built now in a different facility. And I can't because they didn't structure their data the same way. They didn't use the same names. They didn't call the same signals, they didn't describe the same components in that machine the way that the first plant did. And now I'm developing a secondary model in the second plant when I could have just copy and pasted to some degree. I understand completely that there is no two pieces of equipment that are exactly alike, and there's always customization of that machine learning model. However, we would have moved much faster if we could have copied and pasted at least a template of the machine learning model. And so we learned that lesson, and we're reacting accordingly to that. But yeah, we have a foothold, I think, on how to begin using machine learning in our processes to optimize, to detect anomalies. But we don't have a foothold yet on exposing our OT layer data to that Gen AI model. We don't have that yet.
It's a good, yeah.
Yeah, I think
Sorry.
that's a good point from like our discussion with Barry Kelbart last time, Shri, where we talked about the difference between scaling different silos of data or different point cloud solutions or databases to manage that versus like this monolithic structure or historical database where I have my tags already in a common naming convention. So it seems like if we want to leverage this moving forward, that data polishing has to be on the front of our vision as opposed to afterthought, because it's really seems like it's preventing you from moving on to that next step and getting into, industry 5.0,
Yeah.
right? When we start to talk about all
Yeah,
this.
it's also a good place to sort of kind of wrap up our conversation because earlier we talked about, the whole think big, start small, fail fast, but scale fast. This is critical. standardization to be able to actually get to that. Wonderful.
Yeah, it goes back to that technical debt. So I just want to ask two quick questions here before we get into wrap up, though. But based on your experience, Mike, do you feel that digital transformation is a buzzword or that it's helping to revolutionize your operation?
No, I don't think it's a buzzword. It is whether or not um, no, when you look at a lot of when you walk a shop floor and you see, things written on paper, okay, things not organized, the things siloed. One department has a certain method of calculating something and storing something versus another department. One person has paper. One supervisor is using an access database that was created by somebody who left the company 3 years ago. Okay. Somebody in another area of the plant there writing things down. They got them stuffed in their desk drawer. At the heart, everybody always asks me, what's a smart factory? Or when do you know you've achieved it? What is a digital transformation? Putting the data in the hands of a person to make a decision faster. That's the heart of it. Okay. So I don't think digital transformation um, is not a buzzword. We may have watered down digital transformation by including too much artificial intelligence and buzz speak in it, okay? But no, at its core is digitizing the operation so that we have historical records of what has happened. We can make immediate decisions on what's happening now based historically on what's happened, and we can begin to use artificial intelligence to tell us what will happen and ultimately affect the process before it does happen. No, that's real. That's digital transformation. Okay. And I don't think it's a buzzword. It's real. Okay. When it exactly started and when exactly smart factory started, that's a different meaning for everybody in their own company. But digital transformation is real. It's a real
We
thing.
may have a little fatigue, but it's real.
It's real. That's right. Okay. It's real. All right. When you've empowered your employees to make quicker decisions because they have data in their hand or in front of their face that they didn't have before, you're well on your way in digital transformation.
So on the side of that, do you feel that, companies are doomed if they don't adopt digital transformation strategies?
I mean, I don't, doomed is a strong word. Dante, sometimes I think it depends on the complexity of the operation. Okay. I mean, really speaking, I mean, if a company's processes are so simple that they involve, I'm sure there's varying degrees of that. Okay. I think that if you're manufacturing any kind of complex product, okay, with multiple elements of the supply chain, and you're not digitally transforming or collecting, you're not digitizing the data collection of those processes and use it. Yeah, I find it's going to be hard to compete. Okay. Now, there may very well be a company whose process is so simple, all right, that there's really not much involved. I'm not aware of those companies. Okay. Every everything is complex. And yeah, I think I don't know if doomed is the word, but it's gotta be harder to compete with somebody who's able to make more rapid decisions because they have digital.
Awesome. Shree, anything else?
We should have Mike back for more.
Mm.
Yeah, Mike. Well, we definitely appreciate you taking the time. I stay on top of kind of what you're doing, and you've kind of been an inspiration for me. Like you got me excited about this 6 years ago when I first met you. So it kind of sparked my passion and interest. So I thank you for being, a beacon of light for my experience. So I think we're good to wrap this up. We definitely appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And thank you all for tuning in on this episode of the Practitioners Podcast. We hope you found these stories and insights inspiring and informative, as we did. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, let us know where you want us to take this. Share this podcast with your network. And until next time, keep innovating, keep transforming. Thanks for joining. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.